What happens when you graduate and everyone who promised to stick around suddenly disappears? The question lingered in Emily's mind, unanswered, as she stood alone in the middle of the nearly empty school parking lot. The familiar smell of fresh-cut grass and the sound of distant laughter from groups of friends celebrating their newfound freedom seemed like echoes from another lifetime. A lifetime where she had always been surrounded by people. Now there was nothing but silence. And that silence felt suffocating. It was graduation day, and while everyone else seemed to be stepping confidently into the next chapter of their lives, Emily was stuck in place, overwhelmed by a strange sense of loss. A sense of being left behind. Her friends, the ones she had grown up with, had already started their journeys. Some had gone off to college, others had moved to different cities for jobs, and some, well, they were just ready to move on with their lives. All the promises of "we'll stay in touch" and "don't worry, we'll visit" now felt hollow. Emily knew that they were excited about their futures, but for her, it was the end of everything she had ever known. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the anxiety that had started creeping up her spine. She had worked hard for this day, top of her class, scholarship offers pouring in, and yet all she could feel was emptiness. Her parents weren't there to celebrate with her. They had been caught up in their own lives, the same way they always were. Her mom, working at a demanding job, and her dad, traveling constantly for business. Both of them had sent congratulatory texts and brief phone calls, but nothing that felt personal. Nothing that said they were truly proud of her. It wasn't that they didn't care, it was just that they were always so distant. Emily had gotten used to it. In a way, it had shaped her into who she was. Someone who didn't rely on others, who had to find her own way. But now, standing alone, she realized just how much that loneliness had cost her. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The faint voice of the social media influencer she had been watching moments ago on her phone echoed in her head. For a brief moment, Emily almost laughed at the absurdity of it. What could possibly push her forward now? The excitement of a new chapter seemed too distant, too unreachable. It was then that she noticed him, David, the principal of her high school. Unlike most people who had long since left the campus, David was still here, standing near the entrance of the school, watching her. He gave her a warm, comforting smile that felt like the first genuine human connection she'd had all day. He was the only one who hadn't disappeared into the crowd of people rushing toward their futures. David had always been a kind, steady presence throughout Emily's high school years. He wasn't the kind of principal who made speeches just to hear the sound of his own voice. No. David took the time to know the students. He remembered their names, their struggles, and, most importantly, their dreams. He had often taken time out of his busy schedule to speak to Emily when she was going through rough patches. Whether it was about schoolwork or personal life, David was always there with a listening ear and advice that didn't feel forced. But today, he wasn't just the principal. He was the only adult who seemed to understand what she was going through. "Hey, Emily," David called out, waving her over. "How are you holding up?" Emily hesitated, not quite knowing how to answer. Was she supposed to be happy? Relieved? Everyone else seemed to be, so why wasn't she? "I'm okay," she replied, forcing a smile. "Just trying to figure it all out." David nodded as if he understood. He was always so perceptive, like he could see right through her. It's normal to feel this way after graduation. Everything changes, and it's hard to adjust. But remember, the end of one chapter is just the beginning of another. His words were comforting, though they didn't quite soothe the anxiety that still gripped her chest. Emily wanted to believe him, but what if there was nothing to look forward to? What if everything she had worked for, all the late nights, all the sacrifices, didn't lead to something better? "You know," David continued, his tone softer now, "when I graduated, I felt just like you. I thought I had it all figured out, and then I realized I didn't. It took time for me to understand that life isn't a straight path. It's more like a winding road, full of twists and turns. But trust me, Emily, you're going to find your way. And when you do, you'll look back at this moment and realize it was just a stepping stone. Emily looked at him, surprised. It wasn't often that David opened up about his own experiences. He was always the one with the wisdom, the advice, but hearing him share something personal made her feel like she wasn't alone in this. "Thanks, David. I appreciate it," she said, though she didn't quite feel the weight of his words sinking in yet. It wasn't that she didn't trust him. It was just hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel when everything felt so uncertain. David smiled again. "Anytime, Emily. I'm always here if you need someone to talk to." And with that, he turned and walked back into the school, leaving Emily standing in the parking lot, her thoughts swirling. For the first time that day, she didn't feel quite as alone. David's words had planted a seed of hope, however small it might have been. Maybe she wasn't the only one who felt lost. Maybe it wasn't too late to find her way. As she walked toward her car, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something new. It was scary, uncertain, and unfamiliar, but maybe that was exactly what she needed. Life is full of surprises, she thought. Maybe this is just the first one. And with that thought, she started the engine and drove away from the only place that had ever felt like home, ready to face whatever came next, one uncertain step at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emily sat in her car, her fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel. The hum of the engine was the only sound in the otherwise silent car. It was as though the world had paused, waiting for her to figure out what to do next. Graduation was over, the ceremony was a blur of caps and gowns, and now she was left with the aftermath. A strange mix of pride and emptiness. She thought about her friends, the ones who had promised that they would never leave. The ones who swore they would always stay in touch, no matter what. And yet, just hours after the ceremony, those promises already seemed like distant memories. Social media was full of posts and photos, selfies in front of new college dorms, farewell parties with friends, and celebrations for the start of new adventures. But there were no messages from her friends, no texts, no calls, nothing. Emily couldn't help but feel betrayed, even if she knew deep down that it wasn't intentional. People moved on. It was just how life worked. She had always been the kind of person who kept to herself, who didn't ask for much. But today, that silence felt like a personal rejection. Maybe I'm just too boring, she thought. Maybe I wasn't as important to them as I thought I was. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat, and she grabbed it quickly, hoping to see a message from someone who cared. It was a text from her mother, a simple, "Congrats on graduation, sweetie. Hope to catch up soon." Emily stared at it for a moment, her fingers itching to type a response, but she didn't know what to say. Catch up soon? Her mom was always so busy, always so distant. It had been like this for years, short messages, quick updates, and promises to make time that never seemed to materialize. Emily had tried so hard to get her parents' attention over the years. She had made straight A's, she had volunteered, she had done everything she could to make them proud. But their love was always so indirect, so impersonal. She could never escape the feeling that she was just another checkmark on their to-do list. With a sigh, Emily tossed her phone back onto the passenger seat and started driving. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to move. To leave the empty house behind, the ghost of her high school years. She needed to escape the expectations that had never really been her own. The roads outside the town were quiet, and as Emily drove farther, the familiar sights of home faded away. The trees grew thicker, the houses more spaced out, and the bustling city noise of her hometown seemed like a distant memory. It was just her now, alone in the car with no clear direction in sight. It wasn't long before she found herself at a small park, one she used to visit as a kid. It was a place of peace, a place where she had always gone to escape when life felt too overwhelming. She parked the car and sat in silence for a moment, staring out at the empty swings. The park was quiet, save for the rustling of the leaves in the breeze. When she was younger, this park had been her safe haven. She'd run around here with her friends, laughing and forgetting about everything else. But now it felt different. It felt abandoned, just like she felt. Emily's mind wandered back to the promises she had made with her friends. They had all sworn they would stick together after graduation. They had talked about road trips, group texts, late-night phone calls to share their lives. But now she realized those were just words. Words that had been said in the moment, with no real intention behind them. The reality was that people changed, and once they moved on, they didn't always look back. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was a notification from social media. She opened it hesitantly, hoping for something to reassure her, some evidence that she still mattered. But the feed was flooded with photos of her classmates, already settling into their new lives. The excitement in their faces only served to deepen the hollow feeling in her chest. They had all found their place in the world, while she didn't even know where to start. Maybe this is what growing up feels like, she muttered to herself. The realization that you're not as important as you thought. That people come and go. For a moment, she considered sending a message to one of her friends. Hey, how's the new school? Or let's catch up soon. But the words felt fake, forced. She didn't know what to say anymore. And if she was honest with herself, she wasn't sure if she even wanted to hear from them. The excitement in their lives felt like a sharp contrast to her own. The truth was, Emily had always been more of an observer than a participant. She had friends, sure, but none of them really knew her the way she wanted to be known. She had built walls around herself, always keeping her real emotions just beneath the surface, hidden behind a smile or a well-rehearsed joke. It was easier that way, easier than letting anyone in and risking being disappointed. A sudden honk of a horn broke her thoughts. She looked up, startled, and saw a car slowly driving by. It was a familiar face, Jason, a guy from her high school who had always been kind to her, even though they hadn't been close friends. He waved, and she waved back, the motion almost automatic. Jason pulled over and parked next to her. He got out of his car and walked over, his smile warm and genuine. Hey, Emily, he said. You okay? You seem a little off. Emily bit her lip, considering how to respond. She didn't want to dump all her feelings on him, not when they hadn't really talked much since the last day of school. But his sincerity made her feel like maybe it wouldn't hurt to share just a little. Yeah, she said softly, I'm just trying to figure everything out. Everyone's already gone, and I feel like I'm the only one still stuck here. Jason nodded sympathetically. I get it. Everyone's moving on, and it's tough. But hey, don't let it get to you. We all get busy, but that doesn't mean people don't care. Emily wasn't sure if she believed him. It was hard to trust that anyone really cared anymore when it felt like everyone was drifting away. But Jason's presence, however brief, gave her a glimmer of hope. Maybe not everyone would disappear. Maybe there were still people out there who would stick around. Even if it wasn't her friends, maybe there was still something to look forward to. Thanks, Jason, she said, smiling faintly. I needed to hear that. He gave her a reassuring smile before heading back to his car. As she watched him leave, Emily felt a small weight lift off her shoulders. Maybe it wasn't as bad as she thought. Maybe the road ahead wasn't completely empty after all. As she got back into her car, Emily took one last look at the empty park and thought about the future. It was uncertain, yes, but it was also wide open. And maybe, just maybe, she was more ready for it than she realized. The next few days passed in a blur of silence. Emily tried to keep herself busy, checking emails, applying for a few local jobs, looking up college programs, but the hours felt endless. She could never seem to find the energy to follow through with anything. She was just stuck. Every time she checked her phone, it seemed like another one of her friends was off doing something exciting. Road trips, new friendships, and fresh beginnings, they all seemed to be living their best lives while Emily sat at home, feeling like a ghost in her own world. Her friends' lives were moving forward, and hers was standing still. She spent most of her days wandering the house, cleaning, organizing, trying to force herself into some kind of routine. But the house never felt quite like hers. It was quiet, too quiet, and every room echoed with memories of a time when things felt simpler, when she had someone to talk to, someone to share the moments with. The nights were the worst, when everything was dark and still, and the weight of her loneliness sank in. She couldn't sleep. She'd lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the ways she could have changed things. Maybe if she had been more outgoing, more involved, maybe if she had reached out to her friends more instead of waiting for them to come to her, maybe she wouldn't be so alone right now. But no matter how many what-ifs she played in her mind, the truth was that the people she once counted on were gone. Their lives were moving forward, and hers wasn't. They had all found their paths, and Emily had been left behind, unsure of where to go next. One evening, as she sat on the couch flipping through her phone, a notification popped up on her screen. A reminder about the upcoming alumni reunion at the high school. It was just a few weeks away. The thought of returning to that place, to those people, made her heart race. She had been avoiding the idea of seeing her classmates again for fear of feeling even more out of place than she already did. But a small part of her was curious. Maybe, just maybe, it would offer a sense of closure, something to help her move forward. But that was the thing. The more Emily thought about it, the more she realized that she didn't really know what moving forward even meant. What was she supposed to do now? What was she supposed to be? She closed her phone and rubbed her temples, trying to push the anxiety away. As much as she hated to admit it, she felt lost. A knock on the door startled her, pulling her from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the house was so quiet that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to have visitors. When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Standing there was David, the principal from her high school. He was holding a small envelope, his expression gentle but curious. "Hey, Emily," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "No, not at all," she said, surprised but grateful to see him. "What brings you here?" David smiled softly. "I was just thinking about you. I know things can feel a little overwhelming after graduation, and I wanted to make sure you're okay. Have you been holding up?" Emily opened her mouth to respond, but found herself at a loss for words. She hadn't expected anyone to check in on her, let alone David. She had always respected him, admired the way he had managed the school with such calm and compassion. But now, standing in front of him, she felt the weight of her emotions. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I guess I'm just trying to figure out who I am now. I've always been Emily, the good student, the quiet one, but now it feels like there's nothing left. Like everyone else has figured out their place, and I'm just stuck." David nodded as if he understood exactly how she felt. "I get it. I know you've always been someone who keeps things to yourself, but it's okay to not have everything figured out right away. It's normal to feel lost. The thing is, you don't have to figure it out alone." Emily felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down. No one had ever really said anything like that to her. She had always kept her problems to herself, not wanting to burden anyone. But hearing those words, coming from David, made her feel seen. Maybe for the first time in a long time, someone was truly paying attention. David handed her the envelope. "This is just a little something. I thought it might help you feel a bit more connected. It's an invitation to the upcoming alumni reunion. I know it's been a while, but I thought maybe it could be a chance to reconnect with some old friends. Sometimes it's nice to go back to the past, if only for a little while, to help you figure out where you're going. Emily took the envelope, her fingers tracing the edge. She didn't know what to think about the idea of the reunion. Part of her wanted to avoid it, to keep running from the past and the people who seemed to have moved on without her. But another part of her felt a pull, a quiet curiosity. Could seeing her old classmates again help her understand who she was now? Could it give her the closure she was desperately searching for? I don't know if I'm ready for that, Emily admitted, her voice tinged with uncertainty. It just feels like I don't belong anymore. Like I've missed my chance. David smiled warmly, his eyes kind. That's okay. There's no pressure. But I want you to remember something. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. It's okay to be unsure. And it's okay to go to the reunion or not go. Just know that whatever you decide, you have people who care. And you're not alone. Emily's heart ached as she looked at him. It wasn't just the reunion she was afraid of. It was the realization that she had been carrying this weight of loneliness for so long, that she had allowed herself to believe she was invisible, that no one cared about her. But in that moment, Emily felt a shift. Maybe it wasn't too late to make a change. Maybe it wasn't too late to figure out who she really was. Thank you, David, she said, her voice barely a whisper, but full of gratitude. I really needed to hear that. David nodded once more before turning to leave. Take care of yourself, Emily. And remember, it's okay to reach out when you need to. You don't have to go through this alone. As the door closed behind him, Emily stood there for a moment, the envelope still in her hands. For the first time in days, she felt like she had a choice. The weight that had been crushing her chest began to lift, and she felt a flicker of hope ignite deep inside her. Maybe she wasn't stuck after all. Maybe there was still a path forward, even if she couldn't see it just yet. She sat down on the couch and opened the envelope. Inside was the invitation to the reunion, along with a note from David that simply said, "Sometimes, reconnecting with the past helps you find your future." Emily looked at the invitation and took a deep breath. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to go back, even if only for a little while, to see what the past had to offer. The days leading up to the reunion felt like an eternity. Emily spent hours staring at the invitation from David, turning it over and over in her hands, wondering if she should go. The more she thought about it, the more conflicted she became. On one hand, she wanted to reconnect with the past, to see the people she once called friends. But on the other hand, she was terrified of the way things might have changed. What if they didn't recognize her? What if they had all moved on, leaving her behind? She couldn't shake the feeling that she would be walking into a room full of strangers, even though they had all shared the same halls, the same classrooms, just a few months ago. The thought made her stomach twist in knots. But she knew she had to do something. If she kept hiding from her past, she would never be able to move forward. She needed to take the first step, no matter how uncomfortable it might feel. Finally, on the evening of the reunion, Emily found herself standing in front of her bathroom mirror, adjusting her outfit for what felt like the 100th time. She had spent the entire day worrying about how she looked. She wanted to appear confident, even though her insides were screaming with doubt. She settled on a simple navy dress, a style she knew would make her feel put together but not too formal. After a quick brush of makeup, she grabbed her purse, took a deep breath, and left the house. The high school gymnasium looked almost unrecognizable from the last time she had seen it. The floor was polished and decorations hung from the rafters, giving it a celebratory, almost nostalgic atmosphere. The air smelled faintly of popcorn, and the chatter of old classmates filled the space. Emily stood at the entrance for a moment, her heart racing as she scanned the crowd. Faces she hadn't seen in years, people she hadn't thought about since graduation, milled around, laughing, catching up, and sharing stories of where life had taken them. Her throat went dry. What if no one remembered her? What if they didn't care? Just as she was about to turn around and leave, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned quickly, her heart pounding in her chest, and found herself face to face with Lisa, one of her old friends from high school. "Emily?" Lisa said with a surprised but delighted smile. "Oh my gosh, I almost didn't recognize you." Lisa's enthusiasm was a relief. For a split second, Emily felt like she had been transported back to a simpler time when things were easy and the world felt smaller. The two of them had been inseparable throughout most of high school, but after graduation, Lisa had gone off to a university across the country and their communication had tapered off. "Lisa." "Wow, it's been forever," Emily said, smiling awkwardly but feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. "I know, right? You look great. Have you been? What's been going on with you?" Lisa asked, her voice warm and friendly. Emily hesitated for a moment before answering. "I've been okay. I mean, it's been kind of a strange transition, you know? Graduation was so much, and now everything feels a little uncertain." Lisa nodded understandingly. "I totally get that. I had my own moments of doubt when I first got here. But you know, it's all part of the process. You'll find your way, Emily. You always do." The kindness in Lisa's voice made Emily feel more at ease. She hadn't realized how much she had missed conversations like this. Genuine, easy exchanges where you could just be yourself without feeling like you were putting on a performance. It was a small comfort, but it was enough to remind her that maybe not everything had changed. As they talked, more familiar faces began to approach. Emily's former classmates greeted her with warm hugs and friendly smiles, each one eager to catch up. Some of them, like Nathan, who had been her chemistry lab partner, seemed genuinely excited to see her. "You're still the same Emily, huh?" Nathan joked, giving her a light-hearted nudge. "Have you been?" It was all so overwhelming, but in the best way possible. Emily had almost forgotten what it felt like to be surrounded by people who actually knew her, who had shared in her high school experiences, who had lived through the same struggles and successes. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't completely alone. The night went on in a blur of conversations, laughter, and memories. Emily even danced a little, something she hadn't done since the awkward school dances in freshman year. But tonight was different. Tonight, she didn't care about looking silly or being judged. She just wanted to enjoy the moment, to reconnect with the people she used to call her friends. As the night wore on, Emily found herself outside on the school's back porch, looking up at the starry sky. The cool evening breeze felt refreshing against her skin, and the distant sounds of the party inside made her smile. She hadn't felt this relaxed in weeks, maybe months. David, the principal, appeared by her side, offering her a quiet but warm smile. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice low and gentle. "How's it going so far?" Emily sighed, her shoulders relaxing. "It's a lot better than I thought it would be. Everyone's so kind, and I didn't expect anyone to remember me, but they do. I think I needed this. I needed to see that the past wasn't as far away as I thought." David nodded. "You were always a quiet one, Emily, but you had a presence. It's easy to forget how much we mean to others when we keep to ourselves. But tonight, I'm glad you gave it a chance." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in so long. "Thank you for everything. I didn't expect to get this much out of tonight." David's gaze softened, and for a moment, Emily felt like she was talking to someone who truly understood her. Sometimes, the best way to find your way forward is by taking a step back. And I think you're starting to realize that. The words hit her in a way she hadn't anticipated. She had spent so much time looking forward, trying to figure out the next step, that she had neglected to look at where she had come from. Maybe reconnecting with her past wasn't a setback. It was the key to understanding who she was and where she was going. As she stood there with David, watching the stars twinkle above, Emily felt a flicker of hope. Maybe everything she was looking for wasn't as far out of reach as she thought. Maybe, just maybe, the future was a little closer than she realized. And with that, for the first time in a long while, Emily felt ready to face whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weeks following the reunion felt like a fresh chapter for Emily. She was still grappling with uncertainty about her future, but something inside her had shifted. The reunion had reminded her that she was capable of reconnecting with the world she once knew. Her fears about being left behind, about fading into the background of her own life, had been eased, if only for a little while. However, the relief didn't last long. Emily quickly found herself back in the quiet monotony of her daily life. Despite the warm reunion, the constant buzz of social media updates, and the familiar faces from high school, Emily still couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling of being disconnected from her purpose. She spent her days working part-time at a small coffee shop in town, trying to piece together the fragments of her future. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid the bills. And when the shifts were over, she would return to the same empty house, the same quiet nights. But something strange happened after the reunion, a shift she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the nostalgia or the fleeting connection with her old classmates. It was something deeper. One afternoon, as Emily was closing the coffee shop for the day, she noticed an unfamiliar figure standing outside the window. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She could barely make out his face in the dimming light, but something about him felt familiar. The figure stepped closer, and as he did, his face became clearer. "David?" Emily said aloud, her voice hesitant. David, her old principal, stood in front of the coffee shop, looking a little out of place in the fading sunlight. His expression was serious, his usual calm demeanor replaced with an unusual sense of urgency. Emily's heart raced as she unlocked the door and stepped outside to meet him. "Hey, Emily. Do you have a minute?" he asked, his voice quiet but laced with concern. "Sure. What's going on?" Emily asked, feeling a rush of confusion. She wasn't sure what this visit was about, but there was something in David's eyes that told her this wasn't a casual visit. David paused for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "I know you've been going through a lot lately. And I know I'm probably not the first person you'd turn to, but I think you need to know something." Emily's heart began to pound in her chest. What could David possibly want to tell her? It was almost as if the air between them had thickened, charged with an energy she couldn't quite place. Something was coming, something big. He continued, his gaze unwavering. "There's something you don't know about your father. Something I think you should hear from me." Emily blinked, her mind racing. She had never heard David talk about her family before. He had always been more of a mentor than a friend, someone she respected, but never someone she would have expected to discuss her personal life with. "What do you mean? What about my dad?" Emily asked, feeling a knot form in her stomach. Her father had been a distant figure in her life, someone she didn't talk about much. He had always been around, but emotionally, he had never been fully present. After her parents' divorce, Emily hadn't heard from him much. He lived across the state, and their conversations had become few and far between. David hesitated for a moment, as if he wasn't sure how to continue. But then he spoke again, and his words hit Emily like a thunderclap. "Your dad, he wasn't just your dad. He had another life. A life I never expected him to have. I was trying to figure out how to tell you this for a while, but I wasn't sure if the timing was right." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, feeling a rush of confusion and fear. David took a deep breath, and his expression softened, the weight of what he was about to say clearly weighing on him. "Your father was involved in something that wasn't exactly legal. I only found out recently, but I feel like you deserve to know. He wasn't just the man you thought he was. He had debts, connections, things that ran deeper than you could have imagined." For a moment, everything around Emily felt like it was spinning. She felt dizzy, as if the ground beneath her feet had suddenly shifted. Her father, the man she had barely known, had secrets, dark, dangerous secrets. "Wait," Emily stammered. "Are you saying my dad was involved in something criminal?" David nodded solemnly. "Yes, but you need to understand, Emily, this wasn't something he could easily escape. He tried to keep it hidden from you, from your mother, but the truth has a way of coming out, and it's come to light now. I didn't know how to tell you, but I think you have the right to understand why things were the way they were." Emily felt her knees weaken, and she leaned against the side of the coffee shop for support. She felt like the floor had been ripped out from under her. Her mind raced. Images of her father, his voice, the way he would sometimes avoid certain topics, suddenly took on new meaning. She had always wondered why he was so distant, so disconnected. Now she knew it was because he was hiding something much bigger than she could have ever imagined. What does this mean for me?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "What do I do with this information?" David looked at her with sympathy, his eyes full of concern. "I don't have all the answers, Emily, but I think this is something you need to process in your own time. I wanted to tell you because I care. You deserve the truth. And maybe, just maybe, this will help you understand why your dad acted the way he did." "It's not your fault. None of this is." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she stood there, trying to absorb the weight of David's words. Her father, the person she had once hoped would always be there for her, had been hiding a dark, dangerous side of himself. And now it seemed that secret was out. As she stood there, her emotions a whirlwind of confusion and anger, David placed a hand on her shoulder. "Take some time, Emily. There's no rush to make sense of it all right now. But know that you're not alone in this. Whatever comes next, we'll figure it out together." For the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel alone. She felt overwhelmed, yes, but there was something comforting about David's presence, something grounding. Maybe the truth about her father would take time to understand, but in that moment, Emily realized one thing. She wasn't as alone as she had once thought. The days after David's revelation were a blur of conflicting emotions. Emily couldn't stop thinking about the words he had said to her that night. Her father, the man she had spent so many years trying to understand, had been hiding a life she could never have imagined. A life full of secrets, debts, and associations with people and things that were far darker than she had ever known. She had always believed her father's absence in her life was just a result of their divorce, of the natural drift that happens between parents and children when the world changes. But now, with the truth in front of her, everything she had known about him felt like a lie. The distant phone calls, the vague explanations for his sudden disappearances, everything had a new, sinister meaning. Emily spent her nights in a daze, reeling from what she had learned, trying to make sense of it all. She couldn't bring herself to call her father. She couldn't even bear the thought of confronting him with what she now knew. What would she say to him? How could she even begin to comprehend the reality of his double life? The next few weeks passed slowly. She continued working at the coffee shop, and life seemed to carry on as usual, but everything had changed. Emily felt as though she were walking through a fog, unsure of where she was going. Then, one night, when she was about to close up shop, a familiar voice called out from the door. "Emily?" She turned to see Lisa standing in the doorway, her expression soft with concern. Lisa had become a reliable friend again after the reunion, someone who had reached out to make sure Emily was okay. The sight of her brought a small sense of comfort. "Hey, Lisa," Emily said, her voice sounding tired, even to herself. "What's up?" Lisa hesitated for a moment before walking over and sitting down at the counter. "I've been trying to get a hold of you. Are you okay? You've been really quiet lately. I haven't seen you around much." Emily sighed, rubbing her temples. She wanted to explain, to tell Lisa everything that had happened, but she wasn't sure where to begin. There was so much to unpack, so much pain that she wasn't ready to share. "I've been dealing with some stuff," Emily said, avoiding eye contact. It's A lot. I don't really know how to talk about it. Lisa studied her for a moment before speaking gently. You don't have to tell me everything, but you don't have to go through this alone either. Whatever it is, I'm here for you. The sincerity in Lisa's voice broke something inside of Emily. For the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the weight of this burden on her own. Taking a deep breath, she decided to let herself open up, even just a little. You remember how I told you that my relationship with my dad was complicated? Lisa nodded, her expression encouraging. Yeah, I remember you said he wasn't around much. Well, I found out something recently, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something that changes everything. Lisa leaned in, concern etching her face. What happened? Emily hesitated, feeling the weight of the words before she spoke them. David, the principal, told me something about my dad. Something he had been keeping from everyone. My dad was involved in some illegal stuff. I don't know the details, but it's big. It's scary. Lisa's face paled as she processed Emily's words. Wait, your dad was involved in something criminal? Emily nodded, her throat tightening. Yeah, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to process it, and I'm not sure I can ever look at him the same way again. Lisa reached out, placing her hand on Emily's. I'm so sorry you're going through this, but you have to remember, you're not your dad. You're your own person, Em. And no matter what he did, it doesn't change who you are. The comfort of Lisa's words didn't erase the turmoil Emily felt, but it did give her something to hold on to. She had always struggled with her father's absence, with the confusion of not understanding why he wasn't there when she needed him. But now, with this new information, her confusion had transformed into anger, anger at him for hiding the truth from her, and anger at herself for not realizing sooner that there was something wrong. As the evening wore on, Emily found herself talking more openly with Lisa, sharing her feelings of betrayal and frustration. Lisa listened patiently, never interrupting, just letting Emily speak her mind. And with every word, the weight on her shoulders lightened just a little. The next day, Emily decided she needed answers. She couldn't keep running from the truth. She had to confront her father, even if she wasn't sure she was ready to hear what he would say. She picked up her phone and stared at the contact information for her father. Her finger hovered over the call button, but she couldn't bring herself to press it. The fear of his response, the fear of what she might learn next, paralyzed her. Instead, she sent a message, simple but pointed. We need to talk. It's about what you've been hiding from me. The response came quicker than she expected. I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't want you to know about this. I never wanted you to be involved in my mistakes. I'll be home this weekend. We can talk then. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. Emily wasn't sure what would come of their conversation, but she knew she couldn't keep living in the shadow of her father's secrets. She had to face him, and she had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. And with that decision, something inside her shifted again. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was taking control of her life again. The weekend arrived too quickly. Emily spent the entire week in a haze, her mind constantly preoccupied with the looming conversation with her father. It was the moment she had been avoiding for years, but now it felt like the only thing left to do. She couldn't keep pretending she didn't need answers. She had barely slept the night before, lying awake in bed, running through every possible scenario in her mind. What would her father say? Would he deny everything? Would he apologize, or would he try to justify his actions? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she knew one thing for sure: she needed closure. Emily drove to her father's house early on Saturday afternoon, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as the familiar, yet distant, sight of his home came into view. It was a small, old house on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that never seemed to change, even though everything around it had. It stood there, weathered and quiet, like a relic from her past that refused to be forgotten. She parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, taking a deep breath before getting out of the car. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her palms were sweaty. As she walked toward the front door, every step felt heavier, as if the weight of the truth was pressing down on her with each move. Her father answered the door before she could even knock, his face showing the faintest hint of surprise, but also an underlying sadness. "Emily, come in," he said, his voice soft and almost reluctant. Emily hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, her gaze scanning the familiar but now foreign space. The smell of old wood and faintly burnt coffee lingered in the air. Nothing had changed here. It was as if time had stopped for him while her life had moved on. She stood awkwardly in the entryway, not sure what to say. "Sit down, please," her father said, his voice slightly strained. They both made their way to the small living room where Emily had spent so many afternoons as a child, waiting for her dad to come home. He had never been a great communicator, and she remembered countless times as a child, sitting in silence, waiting for him to open up, waiting for him to show her that he cared. But now, things felt different. The silence was suffocating. "I got your message," her father began, his hands clasped together in his lap. "I know why you're here, and I know I owe you an explanation. But before we talk, I just want you to know that this isn't easy for me." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "I don't know if I'm ready for what you're about to tell me," she said, her voice trembling. "But I can't live like this anymore. I need to know why you kept so many things from me. Why you were never honest." Her father let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his eyes as if he were trying to push away the weight of his own guilt. "Emily, I never wanted you to be part of this. I never wanted you to know about the things I got involved in. It was a mistake, a huge mistake, and I regret every moment of it." He paused, his eyes darkening as he began to speak again, his voice lower this time. "After your mother and I divorced, I became involved with some people who weren't exactly law-abiding. At first, it was just small stuff. Dealing with people who owed money, taking care of favors, things like that. But it snowballed, Emily. It got out of control. I couldn't walk away even when I knew I should. I had debts, and I owed people I couldn't pay back. I didn't want you to know any of this. I didn't want to drag you into my mess." Emily's head was spinning. Every word her father spoke seemed to take her further into a reality she couldn't understand. The man she had known as distant, unreliable, had been living a secret life, one that was dark and dangerous. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you try to make things right?" Her father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I thought I was protecting you. I didn't want you to grow up with the same baggage I had. But I see now that keeping you in the dark was the worst thing I could have done. You deserved to know the truth, Emily. I just didn't know how to tell you. Did you ever think about me?" Emily's words were out before she could stop them, and the raw pain behind them made her voice crack. "I spent my whole life thinking you didn't care, that you didn't want to be around. And now I find out you've been living this whole other life? Do you even realize what this does to me?" Her father's face crumpled, guilt flooding his features. "I do, Emily. I do. And I'm so sorry. I know I failed you. I know I can't make up for what I've done, but I need you to understand that I didn't want this for you. I never wanted you to be involved in any of this. I wanted you to have a good life, away from all of this. I just got lost." Emily's anger bubbled up, but so did a deep sadness. Her father was apologizing, but the apology felt hollow. It didn't change the fact that he had let her down. It didn't change the years she had spent wondering why he never came to her rescue when she needed him most. "I don't know what to do with this information," Emily whispered, feeling the weight of his confession crushing her. "How am I supposed to forgive you for this?" Her father reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to forgive me right now. But I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can to fix the mistakes I've made. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right, if you'll give me the chance. Emily's mind raced. She wasn't sure if she could ever fully forgive her father. The betrayal, the years of neglect, the secrets, could she really just let it all go? Could she ever trust him again? She didn't have the answers. But for the first time in a long time, Emily realized that she didn't have to have them all right away. Her father had shown her his weakness, and in some strange way, that made her feel less alone. She didn't have to carry the burden of anger forever. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward, one small step at a time. Let's just take it slow, Emily said quietly, her voice steady but tired. I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll figure it out. Her father nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and gratitude. Thank you, Emily. That's all I can ask for. And with that, the conversation hung in the air, heavy with unspoken words. But Emily knew this was only the beginning. There were still so many pieces to this puzzle, but for the first time, she felt ready to put them together. Emily spent the rest of the weekend reeling from the conversation with her father. Everything she thought she knew about her family, her childhood, her parents' divorce, the quiet distance between her and her dad, was now shaded by a darkness she hadn't expected. Her father's past wasn't just a personal failure. It was a shadow that stretched into her present and threatened her future. On Monday morning, she returned to the coffee shop, exhausted but strangely clear-headed. The moment she stepped behind the counter, the routine of steaming milk and grinding beans gave her a small sense of control. The familiarity was comforting, even if it felt miles away from the chaos unraveling inside her. Later that day, David came in. Not as the principal this time, not even as a mentor. He came in as someone who had once promised he wouldn't leave, and so far he hadn't. You look tired, he said gently, accepting the cup of black coffee she handed him. Emily gave a weak smile. I am. But I'm also, strangely okay. David raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a contradiction. She shrugged. It probably is. But after talking to my dad, I guess I just feel lighter. Not better. Not healed. But like the weight of wondering is finally off my chest. David sat down at one of the corner tables, and after a brief pause, Emily followed, wiping her hands on her apron as she joined him. Did he tell you everything? David asked carefully. I think so, she said. He didn't go into every detail, but it was enough. Enough to know I wasn't crazy for feeling something was off all those years. And enough to know he's not the villain I made him out to be either. Just human. David nodded. It's strange, isn't it? Realizing our parents aren't just our parents, but flawed people who've made bad choices. Emily looked down at her hands. I don't know how to move forward from here. Part of me wants to cut ties and just leave it all behind. The other part wants to stay and try to understand him. David leaned forward. Can I tell you something? And not as your old principal, but as someone who's walked through his own share of regrets. Emily met his eyes and nodded. Running doesn't solve anything. It might feel easier, and yeah, sometimes it buys you space. But whatever you're trying to outrun, family, pain, truth, it always catches up. Healing happens when you stay, when you face the mess and choose to rebuild anyway. Emily didn't speak for a moment. She could feel tears pressing behind her eyes, but she didn't want to cry. Not here. Not now. I'm tired of running, she whispered. I've spent so much time just trying to escape everything, school, people, my past. And the whole time, I thought I was strong for pushing through. But I was just hiding. David nodded. Staying takes more courage than leaving ever will. But that doesn't mean you have to do it alone. There was a silence between them, comfortable, heavy, but safe. Emily realized just how much those words meant coming from someone who had stuck around, who kept showing up even when she didn't ask him to. She had spent so long feeling abandoned, yet somehow, David had stayed in her life. Not because he had to, because he chose to. As the day wore on, Emily couldn't help but replay David's words in her mind. She went home that evening with the coffee shop's closing checklist still spinning in her head, but underneath it all was a new question. What kind of life did she want to build for herself, now that the truth was out? That night, she sat on her bed, flipping through an old notebook she used to carry around during high school. The pages were filled with poems, half-finished stories, and journal entries written in a hurried, teenage scrawl. She had forgotten how much she used to write, how it once gave her clarity. She turned to a page from her senior year. It read, "I don't know where I'm going, but I hope I end up somewhere that feels like home." The words hit her differently now. Her phone buzzed. It was Lisa. "Lisa, movie night?" "Just us. No drama. Just popcorn and bad Netflix." Emily smiled. "Emily, yes. I'll bring ice cream." For the first time in weeks, she let out a real laugh. Maybe the path forward didn't have to be grand or dramatic. Maybe it started with little choices like deciding not to run, choosing to answer a text, choosing to say yes to life even when it hurt. Later that week, Emily met with David again, this time not in a coffee shop or hallway, but in the small back office of the local community center. He had invited her to help with a new mentorship program for recent grads struggling with post-high school life. "Kids need someone who's been through it," David told her. "And you've got more to offer than you realize." Emily looked at the list of names. Young people just like her, caught between the end of something and the terrifying start of everything else. She felt a flicker of something deep inside her, purpose. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." It wasn't a grand, cinematic moment. It was quiet, simple, but it mattered. Because that night, Emily didn't fall asleep feeling broken. She fell asleep feeling brave. And she was just getting started. The following weeks unfolded like the slow blooming of spring after a brutal winter. Emily didn't suddenly have it all figured out, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't just drifting. She had purpose. She had people. She had something to wake up for. Her afternoons were now spent at the community center, where she co-led a small mentorship group with David. At first, she didn't know what to expect. The teens who showed up were quiet, defensive, and clearly unsure why they were even there. But in them, Emily saw versions of herself, lost, overwhelmed, and waiting for someone to show up and say, "You matter." One girl, in particular, stood out. Her name was Sam. She wore a hood pulled tightly around her face every meeting, sat in the back, and rarely spoke. But Emily saw the look in her eyes, that quiet desperation masked by sarcasm and detachment. It was a look Emily knew all too well. After their third meeting, Emily caught Sam in the hallway. "Hey," she said gently, "thanks for coming today." Sam shrugged. "Didn't have anything better to do." Emily smiled. "That was my excuse, too. But I kept coming back. Guess that says something." Sam looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "You're not like the others." Emily's smile faded into something more real. "Neither are you." It was a small moment, but it mattered. Emily was learning that healing didn't come from dramatic gestures. It came from consistency, from listening, from showing up. Outside the center, her relationship with her father remained fragile. They had agreed to meet once a week. At first, the conversations were strained, surface level and laced with caution. But over time, small pieces of trust began to rebuild. One Sunday afternoon, while sipping tea at a quiet park bench, her father looked over and said, "You remind me a lot of your mother." Emily raised an eyebrow. "How so?" She didn't take any crap from anyone. Always had this fire. "You've got that too. But you're softer with it. More thoughtful." It wasn't a deep declaration, but coming from him, it meant something. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she let the words sit between them, warm and strange. She didn't know if they'd ever be truly close again. But she also didn't feel the urge to run. That in itself was progress. Back at the coffee shop, Emily's days were still filled with lattes and baked goods, but even that started to feel different. She had begun journaling again, not out of habit, but because her thoughts were finally starting to make sense when she wrote them down. One entry read, "Maybe it's not about finding where you belong. Maybe it's about making space wherever you are for yourself and for others." That thought stayed with her. On a quiet Tuesday, David dropped by the shop again. This time, he wasn't alone. A local counselor had reached out, interested in helping expand the mentorship program. They were hoping Emily would consider becoming more involved, maybe even take a leadership role. "You've got a gift," David told her, stirring his coffee. "You know how to meet people where they are. That's rare." Emily laughed, modestly brushing off the compliment. "I think I'm just good at being honest about how messy life can be." David grinned. Exactly. The opportunity scared her. It felt too big, too official. She wasn't sure she was ready to be a leader. After all, wasn't she still figuring things out herself? But when she thought about Sam and the other teens who came every week, when she thought about the version of herself who had sat alone on graduation night, feeling abandoned by the world, she knew she had to say yes. "I'll do it," she told him. "But I'm doing it my way." David raised his cup in salute. Wouldn't have it any other way. One evening, as Emily walked home under the orange glow of streetlights, she passed by the high school. The building loomed large and familiar. A place that once held so much pain and confusion now looked smaller, almost nostalgic. She stopped for a moment at the front gate, running her hand along the cool metal. She remembered the girl she had been, quiet, anxious, trying so hard to be seen. She had spent so much of her life waiting for someone else to validate her worth. But not anymore. Now, she saw her own reflection more clearly. She wasn't defined by who left, or by what her father did, or by the paths she didn't take. She was defined by how she chose to respond. By staying, by showing up, by building something from the pieces. As she turned away and continued down the street, Emily felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. Not the loud, romantic kind that comes in sweeping gestures, but the quiet kind, the steady kind. The kind you earn one day, one choice, one small victory at a time. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when everything nearly fell apart. Emily had been juggling too many things at once, her shifts at the coffee shop, her growing responsibilities at the community center, weekly meetings with her father, and the slow, careful rebuilding of her friendship with Lisa. Each role felt meaningful. Each person she was helping gave her a reason to keep going. But somewhere in all of it, she had started neglecting herself. She hadn't noticed how often she was skipping meals or sleeping only a few hours a night. She didn't recognize how she was absorbing everyone else's pain without setting boundaries. She just kept pushing forward, convinced that staying strong meant always saying yes, until her body said no. It started as a dizzy spell during the afternoon rush at the shop. One minute she was steaming milk for a latte, the next her vision blurred, and the sounds of the cafe faded into a dull echo. She stumbled, grabbing the counter for support. Emily, her coworker Megan, called, alarmed. "You okay?" Emily nodded quickly, brushing it off. "Yeah, just lightheaded. I'm fine." But she wasn't. And she knew it. That night, she skipped the mentorship meeting and ignored David's text when he checked in. Instead, she curled into herself on the couch, overwhelmed by the heaviness of it all. She hadn't cried in weeks, but now the tears came in a quiet, relentless flood. Everything she had been carrying. The truth about her dad, the responsibility of leading, the weight of trying to keep it all together, came crashing down. "I can't do this," she whispered to herself in the dark. "I'm not built for this." The words scared her. Because she didn't just mean the program or the shop. She meant everything. For a brief moment, the thought she hadn't dared to entertain in a long time crept back in, what if I just disappeared? What if I just left, like everyone else? The next morning, she didn't go to work. She didn't go to the community center. She didn't answer any calls or texts. She just walked. In the rain. No umbrella. No destination. She passed familiar landmarks, the diner where she and Lisa used to hang out after school, the bookstore where she once dreamed of working, the playground where she scraped her knee in second grade. The world around her hadn't changed much, but she had, and she wasn't sure if she liked who she was becoming. When she finally stopped walking, she found herself standing in front of David's house. She didn't remember deciding to go there. Her feet had just taken her. David answered the door almost immediately, concern etched deep into his face. "Emily, I was about to go looking for you." She didn't speak. Just stood there, soaked to the bone, eyes empty. "Come in," he said, gently. She followed him into the warmth, the smell of coffee and old books washing over her like a memory. She sat on his couch, still silent, arms wrapped around herself. He handed her a towel, then sat across from her without a word. He didn't try to fill the silence. He just waited. Finally, she broke. "I don't think I'm okay." David nodded. "I know. And that's okay. I thought I could handle it. Everything. My dad. The program. Work. Life." Her voice cracked. "But I can't." David leaned forward, his voice steady. "You don't have to. You were never meant to do this alone, Emily. No one is." Tears slid down her cheeks. "But I'm scared. If I stop, if I let go of even one thing, it'll all fall apart. I'll fall apart." David shook his head. "Falling apart isn't the worst thing. Pretending you're not is. You're allowed to be human. You're allowed to rest." Emily's breath came in shaky bursts. "I feel like I'm failing everyone." "You're not," he said. "You're just tired. And you need help. That's not weakness. That's wisdom." The words settled in her chest like a warm weight. For so long, she had been trying to be everything for everyone. But maybe what she really needed was to let someone be there for her. Later that day, David drove her home. On the way, they talked about the mentorship program, how she could step back for a while, how others could support her. Emily admitted that she had started feeling like her value came only from what she gave to others. "That's a lie the world tells you," David said. "That you're only worthy if you're useful. But your worth isn't in what you do. It's in who you are. And who you are is someone worth showing up for." As they pulled up to her apartment, Emily felt something shift. She wasn't fixed. She wasn't fully okay. But she wasn't alone. And that mattered more than anything. That night, she sent a voice message to Lisa. "Hey, I know I've been kind of off the radar. I had a bad day. A really bad one. But I think I'm gonna be okay. Just wanted to say thanks for not giving up on me. Let's hang out soon." Lisa replied in less than a minute. "I've got ice cream. And you're not allowed to say no." Emily smiled, even through the tears. She also wrote in her journal for the first time in days. "I broke today. Really broke. But I didn't disappear. I didn't run. I let someone see me. The mess. The fear. All of it. And I think that's what healing looks like. Not strength, but honesty." The storm inside her hadn't passed, but she wasn't drowning anymore. And that was enough for now. It had been nearly a year since Emily graduated, but the halls of the high school still echoed in her memory like a song she didn't know she missed until she heard it again. One crisp morning, David called and asked if she could stop by the school. "I've got something for you," he said cryptically. Emily hesitated. Returning to that building, walking through those fluorescent-lit hallways filled with both triumphs and pain, it felt heavy. But she was no longer the girl who hid from the past. So, she said yes. When she arrived, everything looked smaller. Not physically, just emotionally. The lockers weren't looming walls anymore. The front office didn't buzz with intimidation. The place hadn't changed. She had. David greeted her at the front door with a knowing smile. Ready? Ready for what? He handed her a keychain. On it was a small silver tag engraved with one word, Mentor. Her brow furrowed. What's this? You're officially on staff for the Summer Mentorship Pilot Program, he said. I pulled some strings. The school board approved it, and I told them we already had the perfect leader. Emily blinked. You're serious? David nodded. You've done the work, Emily. You've earned this. You've shown up when it counted most. Not just for others, for yourself. That's what makes someone a leader. Tears stung her eyes, but she smiled through them. You stayed. You really stayed. David looked at her with quiet sincerity. So did you. The summer unfolded like a slow golden hour. Emily stepped into her new role with a mixture of nerves and confidence. She wasn't trying to be perfect anymore, just present. She helped design the curriculum, coordinated meetups, and mentored teens who reminded her of who she once was, full of questions, fear, and potential they couldn't see yet. Sam was now one of the most vocal members of the group. She had even volunteered to co-lead a workshop on mental health. You were right, Sam told her one afternoon. You said I wasn't like the others. I think. Maybe that's my superpower. Emily grinned. It is. Her relationship with her father had settled into something steady and fragile, like glass that had cracked but hadn't shattered. They didn't pretend everything was perfect. Instead, they found peace in small things, Sunday walks, shared meals, occasional awkward laughter. He was in therapy now, something he had never considered before. Emily didn't need an apology anymore. She just needed effort, and he was finally giving it. I'm proud of you, he told her one evening. Not just for what you're doing, but for who you are. She believed him. For the first time, she truly believed him. Lisa remained a steady presence, bringing over takeout on tough nights, dragging Emily to thrift stores on weekends, and reminding her to rest. Their friendship wasn't shiny or dramatic, it was solid. Real. Forged in years of love and disappointment, rebuilt with time and honesty. One night, sitting on Emily's balcony eating popsicles, Lisa looked over and said, You know, you used to scare me. Emily raised an eyebrow. What? You kept so much inside. I always felt like if I pushed too hard, you'd break. But now? You're different. Stronger. Softer, too. Emily laughed. You're gonna make me cry. Good. You need to cry more. You used to think it was weakness. Emily wiped her eyes, smiling. Now I know it's survival. On the 1-year anniversary of her graduation, Emily returned to the school auditorium. Alone. Just to sit. To remember. She walked onto the empty stage, stood at the center, and looked out at the rows of vacant chairs. I thought this night would break me, she whispered. Everyone left. But I stayed, and that made all the difference. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving people wrong. It was about proving to herself that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain, it was about carrying it differently. She stood there for a while longer, then turned and walked off the stage, not with regret, but with power. That night, she posted something to her now modestly growing online journal. Everyone left me after graduation. Friends disappeared. Family fractured. Dreams stalled. But one person stayed, the principal who saw me when I couldn't see myself. And that gave me the courage to stay too. To stay in the fight. To stay with myself. And now I know I was never really alone. Not then. Not now. To anyone who feels forgotten after the world moves on. Stay. Not because it's easy. Because it's worth it. The post went viral. Comments poured in. I needed this today. This made me cry. Thank you. I was the one who left. I wish I hadn't. You just gave me the strength to stay. Emily sat back and let the words wash over her, not out of pride, but gratitude. She hadn't just survived the past year. She had lived it. Fully, bravely, softly. And as she turned off her phone and curled up beneath her favorite blanket, she whispered to herself, "I'm still here." And she smiled. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?